I'm so happy to be here, and I feel really blessed to be amongst this group. The energy, thank you very much, is so great just around here. This is probably going to be very different from what you guys have been learning, or at least what I've been seeing around. Much more, I guess, from a clinical, intellectual, mostly clinical perspective, I should say, as a therapist. So as Frank was saying, not only do I do radio, but I started off as a sex therapist and a clinical psychologist, and I spend my days in clinic. So I mostly deal with sexual dysfunction and marriage counseling. Those are my two main areas. And at night, every night I go off and go to the radio station and do a radio show that's based on sexuality, and we talk every night about, we push the envelope, nobody censors me, it's fabulous, I bring on guests, Frank has been a guest numerous times, and we'll talk about anything from anal sex to tantric sex to spirituality to we've covered everything. We've done probably over 3,000 shows by now. So it's exciting. It's fun for me to have a reach, and I take it very seriously, this responsibility that I have to reach that many people. So, on any given night, I mean, Montreal's English community is not that big, but it's about 50,000 listeners or so. And so it's a responsibility, and for me, I feel it's really important that a lot of topics that are taboo get out to the public in a professional, bring on people who know their stuff and really can talk about it to educate, rather than just let regular media pick up on headlines and stories and myths and all kinds of stuff. So that's one of the reasons why I do it. And one of the reasons why I get involved too with Frank, the Sexual Health Network of Quebec is an organization that promotes sex education to our teenagers. So that's another one of my pet projects that I love to advocate for, which I think is an absolute necessity. There's not enough. And the other thing, I just released a book called The Sex Bible for people over 50. And here's another area which is also taboo. So, I'll tell you a little bit about why, but let me tell you what I'm going to talk about today, and I'll tell you why I wrote the book. So I want to talk a little bit about, yes, long-term relationships, aging, and sexuality as well. I want to look at what do we talk about with love and intimacy, always coming from the perspective of what I see in my practice, in my office, right? The effects of aging on our sexuality, because in long-term relationships, well, we get older in those relationships. So when we're talking about, right, relationships that are 10, 20, 30 years old, we're usually older. We're not 20. We're usually 50 and beyond. The benefits of sexuality. I want to really talk about desire, sexual desire, and the gender differences, something that I've been working on a lot as well. And, some things as to what are some of the things I help couples do in order to keep that love and the sex alive, when to seek help, when should you act. And you can interrupt me anytime. We're a small, intimate group. It's always a lot more fun. So if you have anything that you want to add to it, or your experiences or questions around it, I really want to hear from you. So why did I write the book for the 50-plus crowd? First, it was a very selfish reason. I was turning 50, and all my friends are 50, and I said, hell if I'm going to stop having sex, and hell if it's going to get better, not worse, okay? So, and I started noticing in talking with people that sex does get better as you get older. And I'm looking at all these women especially and seeing that, wow, they're owning their sexuality at this age. There's, there's a reason why it gets better. However, that's one side. I also hear from other people who are way too young, who have given up on sex, who say, forget it, it doesn't matter anymore. I'm past the due date. It's fine. It's over. And I look at them and say, how old are you? You're not 90, right? So that's one of the main reasons. And also to understand the relationships and how the changes associated with aging we need to know about these things. This is the adult education we don't get. So teens don't get education. Adults, what do we get? Porn? Is that our education? I don't think so. So that's one of the things. And in my practice, I see a lot of men with erectile dysfunction, women with painful intercourse, all kinds of situations that I know are age-related, but yet the panic is intense for these people and very scary, and part of it is because they don't have the information required. You know, they don't make the connection between their aging process and what's happening to them. The other thing is too that as we get older, just like in everything else, our needs change. So this is a book really about adapting to all of the changes that happen. Now, some changes happen at a younger age, and some happen much, much later. You have some people who start to feel the effects of aging at 40, and some at 60, and some at 70. So it's not a one thing, but it's for all that age group. And the other thing is, just as sex and youth is taboo, and sex is still a taboo subject. I hate to say it in this day and age, and especially in this room. I don't know how many of you have experienced it yourselves, thinking or seeing other people respond to sex as a taboo when you speak to them about it, or not speaking about it. Oh, you do something in sex, well, they kind of get embarrassed or turn red. You mention, you say the word vagina or penis, and they flip out. Why? Why is that? Why are parents still not mentioning those parts with their children? Why? Still taboo in this day and age? That's crazy. We have to, I'm preaching to the converted, obviously. This is the group that does go out and say, hey, get with it, people. And another problem, another reason why that I see is that when there's a lack of sex, it could lead to infidelity, it leads to unhappiness, it leads to relationship issues, and then they end up in my office. So for all those reasons, this book was written. One of my favorite quotes is this: to love is nothing, to be loved is something, to love and be loved is everything. So, the love component of it all as well. So I don't want to not talk about the love component. But I do want to talk about infidelity for a moment. I do give some talks on how to kind of affair-proof your marriage and what have you. And in my practice, much of the couples that I see are couples who have lived through an infidelity. And then they end up, and these are couples who, whether they are straight, gay, or even polyamorous, so where they still feel betrayed. There are still different levels of betrayal. So I've seen it in all the different populations. And I do see different populations. So if we look at just statistically, there's a huge number, 60% of men, 40% of women, and that's just like on average, because some studies show much more, some much less. We're seeing that there's a trend towards women reaching the same level as men in terms of infidelity, depends on the age that you look at. But we do know that about 80% of marriages or long-term relationships are touched by infidelity. So we're not talking about open relationships here, we're really talking about betrayals. Right? Secrets. 25% of men have had more than 4 affairs. The peak cheating for men is around midlife and into the 50s. So one statistic I saw was you're most likely to begin cheating or start cheating when your partner is pregnant, for men also. So, you can add the stuff up together for that. And peak cheating for women is mid-30s, early 40s. So it seems to be somewhere in that category of the period where you're having young kids, where you're just far extended into all kinds of craziness in your life and dissatisfaction, I guess. And here's an interesting statistic. 95% of all marriages that begin as an adulterous liaison end in divorce. So if you leave your husband or wife or your partner for somebody else, that you're likely to end in divorce right there. Well, that's also pretty logical if you think about the trust issues, right? Do you ever really trust a relationship that began as a mistrust, as a betrayal? It's kind of tough. So those are some of the things that I see as well. And it's interesting because I do see that in my practice, couples who come in and they talk to me about their histories together, and often it will be that, oh yes, we started as an affair, and then here are the issues that are coming up, and inevitably there's a trust issue or there's another infidelity. So, and that's what kind of brings them in. So what do people say? Why do they cheat? Men and women are somewhat different in some of their needs, but not always. I mean, women can cheat for the very same reasons. And I want to first apologize for being heterosexist in a lot of what I'm saying, because I'm really talking about straight relationships right now. So I'll say words like marriage and husband, wife, and things like that. So I apologize for that. Just easier to do that. And also heteronormative. So I'm talking mostly in those terms. So I apologize ahead of time. And I'm also generalizing. So I know you'll say, well, no, that's not true. Not everybody's like that. I know that. But I'm generalizing right now for the sake of, understanding. Every time I'm on the radio and I do something like that, I'm always getting texts. That's not true. Not all women are like, I'm not like that. I said, okay, I'm not talking about just you. Like, okay, let's say 70%, So I kind of make up a number somehow. So women will often state that they cheat because they're lonely. It's a question of loneliness for them. It's not the main thing that drives them is not the sex in the sexuality in terms of why they cheat. They escape the monotony of marriage, or they suspect their partner's cheating, so it's called revenge, a revenge affair. Often the dissatisfaction comes from a lack of intimacy. They may have the sex and none of the connection or the intimacy that they crave, the attention. So often they're looking for the attention. They feel unappreciated, taken for granted. Again, you think about the statistic, right? Between their 30s and 40s, women complain at that point about doing everything, so they take care of the kids and they take care of the house and they go to work and they do this and they do that, and their work isn't appreciated. Again, I'm generalizing. There are plenty of men who do plenty of stuff, so I don't, take it with that little grain of truth. They feel neglected, they're generally unhappy, and they also they connect with someone who makes them feel important, who makes them feel cared for, who puts them on a pedestal, who makes them feel like the goddess, right? And that's something that they lose or they say they have lost in their marriages or in their relationships. Interestingly enough, so when women cheat, generally speaking, it's because they're unhappy. And generally, it's almost an exit strategy for them. When men cheat, men will say they're not unhappy with their partners. It almost doesn't even seem to be related to their happiness with their wives or their partners. So mostly what they'll say is they want sexual variety, they want the ego boost. Sometimes it's as simple as opportunity. The opportunity presented itself, didn't know how to say no. Why are you smiling so much? And then, you also have men who say they still need intimacy, they need reassurance about their desirability. I mean, men and women have the same emotional needs as well. But they're not on the top priority in terms of the list. So, but it really is interesting when you speak to men, because women clearly say, I'm dissatisfied, I'm unhappy. And the men are like, oh, I love my wife. So you realize she might leave you, right, if she finds out? But no, I would never leave my wife. And the majority of men who cheat are absolutely not interested in leaving their partners. Whereas the women, if they were able to, would leave their partners. And an interesting statistic is that 87% of divorces are initiated by women. The women leave. Why do you think that is? Because the men have to pay. Can be. Why do you think? Any other ideas as to why it's the women who initiate? Yeah. Because the man won't do it? Why won't he do it? Right, and eventually they get fed up, and they say, I'm done. And I hear this so often. Like they say, okay, that's it, I'm done. Like, I'm done, it's finished. Like they have the one fight that kills everything, and he's like, what do you mean it's done? We were just fighting over whatever. You're gonna leave me because of this? Oh no, I'm leaving you because of the 10 years that I've been asking you to do this. Oh, I'll do it. Then they end up in therapy, but she's already out. She's already removed herself emotionally, and he's desperate. He becomes desperate to hang on at that point because he didn't feel there was anything wrong. Or he could live with whatever was wrong. It wasn't such a big deal. His needs were, I think you're absolutely right about the needs being met, and women are the nurturing ones doing. Not that men aren't nurturing. Again, please, I don't want to get, don't beat me up for that. I'm just telling you what I see, seriously. All right, so people often ask, like, what's intimacy, right? I always say, break it up into 4 words, into me see. And this is what people seek. What keeps relationships together? It isn't, yes, sex is great, of course it's great, but it isn't the thing that keeps relationships together. If you have sex plus intimacy, great. If all you have is sex, no intimacy, it's not gonna last either. So the tenderness, I'm telling you this now because it's so important, and I know you all know this, it's just a question of putting it all together, but where this has such an effect on desire. And we'll get to that, and you'll remember all of these things because they matter, especially for women. So talking openly about sexual desires, about needs. You'd be surprised, and I know, again, I'm not talking to the right group here. The other people should be here who need to learn about this, but just talking about your own needs and talking about sex with your partner seems to be a really difficult thing for most people. You would be surprised. Sometimes I will get questions, and I say to them, well, did you talk to your partner? All you have to do, well, tell him. Tell her. And that seems to be like, really? I could do that? So people need that permission to talk openly with their partners. It's and that's part of intimacy, right? So trust, commitment, honesty, empathy. These are all the ingredients of a happy, healthy relationship that needs to be maintained. And obviously, if you don't have any time together, if you never talk, you can't have intimacy without time, right? You need time together in order to do that. So do you mind if we switch now? I want to switch gears to what happens to our sexuality as we age. So this is the technical part. So forgive me if it gets a bit boring here, but I find it's really important for us to recognize that things do change. And I hear from people say, oh, I want to be like I was 10 years ago. I want to get that back. I said, oh, you're not going to get it back. It just doesn't come back, I want to be able to do what I did at 22, but it doesn't work that way. No matter what we do, we age. Let's accept it and move on from there, right? Let's find a way. So again, it's in response to a little bit of that. So I just want to explore a few myths that are out there. A lot of people think that as you get older, the quality declines, right? It doesn't, and these are just common myths that are out there, not among necessarily this group, but out there in the world, people think, oh, you get older, sex goes downhill with you, right? Now, I talk to a lot of people now I've been doing a lot of seniors residences, so I go and speak to seniors, and I'm talking average age is about 83, okay? And ever since this book came out, so it's been great because I've been going to all these residences in Montreal, and I get to talk to these people, and they are describing amazing sex, and a lot of it. In fact, I tell everybody I know, when you get older, if you're single, you get yourself into one of these places, especially if you're a guy. You will be busy every night. I go there and I bring like buckets of condoms with me because I give them a safe sex talk as well, right? Because they're 80. Last time they used the condom was in a war when they were doing it with a prostitute. And they were worried about pregnancy. Nobody's getting pregnant at 83 years old. So and they line up and they take their condoms and off they go. And they tell me that, and even their kids tell me, they can't, they go to the front desk and they say, hey, where's my dad? I can't, well, he didn't sign out, so he's here. And they find him in this woman's room. And the next day, or the next week, it's in another woman's room. So they're very busy. Just saying. So I know some of you have parents maybe in that age group. They're doing it. They're having fun, too. Okay, so I digress a lot, so just you can always bring me back to where you need me. Okay, so one of the other myths is that as you get older, or even if you don't lubricate, if you don't get an erection, it means you're not aroused. Well, you know that as you get older, well, again, this group probably knows that, but you can have an orgasm without an erection, and you can have an orgasm without lubrication. So, and you can be aroused without lubrication. That's the way our bodies work, and as we age, that's what it is, and it's not immediate anymore, right? So we'll talk about some of those changes after. Another myth is that erection problems are inevitable, that all men will have an erectile dysfunction. That goes with aging. Only about 25% of men will experience erectile dysfunction enough to require medication. So it's not a given, and that can happen at 50, 70, 80 for the first time. So I know I met one gentleman that came into my office. I think he was 84 years old, and he hadn't had sex for 20 years. His wife, I don't remember the exact story, but they hadn't had sex in 20 years, and he was racked with guilt because he started volunteering at a senior's home and fell in love. So he was having an affair, essentially his very first affair at like 84 years old, and he was stunned that he says, I didn't need a thing. It was hard as a rock, no problem. I didn't need a thing, And he shocked himself because he thought he was dead. He said, oh, it's dead. It's not working, He hadn't used it, and he was saying, oh, I haven't used it in 20 years. It's probably dead. And it wasn't. It really surprised him. And he didn't need anything. Another myth is that orgasms when we're younger are better. True? False? Very false. You don't even know what's happening to you when you're younger. Another one is that men and women with heart problems should avoid sexual activity. As we age, right? This is one of those fears. Oh my God, I'm going to die. My heart can't take it. My heart can't take all this excitement. Well, interestingly enough, only about 1% of men will die of a heart attack during sex. It's a great way to go, don't get me wrong. If you're going to go, it's a good way to go. However, of that 1%, something like 75, 80% of that 1% are doing it with a mistress. They're actually cheating on their partners when they have that heart attack. So, right? Right? The mistress is killing them, right? So that's what they need to worry about more. Another myth is that sex has to end in orgasm. Well, as we get older, the need to orgasm isn't as immediate. It's not. It's much more necessary, or we feel it is, when we're younger. As we get older, of course, that changes. Another thing is that oral sex is for the young. When we think of oral sex, we think teenagers. We say, oh, all those teenagers, they're all having oral sex in the back of the bus, Well, they're not having any more than they were 50 years ago, by the way, just saying. And in fact, studies have shown that people over 40 are much more likely to engage in oral sex and enjoy it more. And intercourse is the only sex that counts. Anything else isn't sex. Well, again, this is one of my pet peeves. People always say, oh, I had sex last night. I say, sex or intercourse, or what sex? What kind of sex did you have, right? Sex is one term. It's like, another pet peeve is like when we use the word vagina. You mean vulva or you mean vagina? Which one? Vagina, part of the vulva. Intercourse, part of sex, right? So it's changing the vocabulary a little bit so people start to expand their horizons a little. Anything up till now? Any comments or questions or no? Good to go? So this is another one of my favorite quotes. Integrity, honesty, and respect breed love. Love breeds good sex, and good sex breeds love. I forget where I took that from, but I took it from somewhere. And just in case you do need some convincing. Here are some reasons why you should have regular sex. So now the reasons are all taken from studies. So these are all science-based reasons why. First of all, there's no bad reason for sex. Like there's not one, right? Can we think of one reason that's not good for us to have sex? Unless we're compulsive about it, and let's be real. If you're masturbating, 20 times a day and your penis is chafing, there might be a problem, but if everything else is a go, it's okay. So we know it lowers mortality rates. People who have regular sex live longer. They do. They feel better. They feel younger. They look younger. They feel connected. They have a better, attitude on life. They're more positive people. They are calmer. They're less irritable. These are all very good reasons. People who have regular sex have a better immune system. They sleep better, better digestion, better memory. It even burns calories, Like, okay, it's not like replaces a gym workout. It's only 200 calories for 30 minutes. And when I do this to other groups, they're like, who does it for 30 minutes? It's like 200. So what do we know? Here's some recent findings on sexuality and aging. We know that 1 in 4 people over 75 have sex around once a week. That's according to the American Association of Retired Persons. So that's one statistic. I'm sure we can go on different sites and find different statistics, and in the book there's many different ones, but anyhow. More than 50% over the age of 60 had an active sex life, and 40% of those wanted more. So it's still very much something of interest. And if you look at websites in terms of dating websites and the biggest rise in dating, in the dating world pool, is the 55 plus. It also coincides with the biggest rise in STDs. So one of the biggest rise in STDs is happening in the middle-aged category. So people who are going back out into the dating pool. After divorce or widowhood or what have you. So after 50 crowd. So let's talk about some of these changes. How many people here actually work in the field of sexuality, like our therapists or educators? Okay. Mikey, you don't work in the field. You hang out with people. Mikey runs the Salon de l'Amour, by the way, just so in case you didn't know who he was. Okay, so some of the changes as we age. What's interesting for women is the changes aren't as noticeable. And if you compare men and women, even though as women we experience it, we know that it's happening, it doesn't interfere as much because they are things that could be more easily remedied, like lubrication. If you think about painful sex or dryness in the vagina, it can be remedied, and so intercourse is more possible. But with a penis that is not erect, intercourse is not possible. So these are, and the changes happen for women. Changes usually coincide with the perimenopausal, menopausal, postmenopausal period. For men, aging begins somewhere around 35, the aging process. That means that some men will experience some of these aging effects at 35, some at 65. There's no cutoff, For women, all women will experience some level of vaginal dryness at some point. Not all men will experience the changes. Just like all women go through menopause, every single woman, but not all men will go through andropause, or the male menopause, for example. So for women, lubrication takes longer. So what was once, again, very similar to the erection, right? So what was once easy, just a thought, reading erotica, seeing erotica, that was enough to lubricate. Now it takes longer to get that level of lubrication. The one area that seems to get thinner, whereas everything else gets fatter, is the vagina, unfortunately. The tissues of the vagina get thin, and it atrophies. So it starts to, you know, shrivel a little, unfortunately. And if you use it, actually, it will happen less. So the vagina does atrophy, just like any other muscle would atrophy as you age. And because the lining gets thinner, it's much more prone to small cuts and fissures. And because there's less lubrication, it becomes like tissue paper and very thin onion paper that can break. So it causes burning, and it causes itching, and it causes all of these very unpleasant feelings. But again, yeah, it can be remedied, and it does cause painful intercourse. I've known many a woman, a postmenopausal woman, who has given up on sex because it's too painful. And just the story of one particular woman, it was my mother's friend, actually, and she took me aside one day and she says, I haven't had intercourse in about 3 years. My vagina hurts so much, like I can't even be bothered. I hate it now. And I said, well, do you use a lubricant? And she goes, well, what do you mean? Well, what is that? She didn't know about lubricants, all right? She just didn't know. And I gave her the prescription, I wrote on a piece of paper, go get this, go get that. She did, and 3 months later, she came back and she says, my God, it has changed our life. Now we have sex all the time. It took away all that pain. So just that little bit of it, that was enough to convince me women need information, right? And we need information about our bodies. So this is what happens. Also, the orgasm that we get is less intense. Part of it is because the clitoris also loses some of its sensation, or it requires more intense stimulation to get to the same place. So for some women experience more intensity. This is general. Not every woman will go through every one of these things. Right? And for some women, they do experience a decline in sex drive, along with the loss of estrogen, and with, comes the loss of testosterone. And so they're, depending on what you do about it, it will affect women differently. And we know that regular intercourse is preventative in many ways, and women who engage in regular intercourse, whether it be with a sex toy or a partner, there's less atrophy. They can maintain their sexual responsiveness better. They produce more estrogen in the area. So it's a little bit, to me, it's akin to a muscle that if I wrap my arm in a cast for 3 months and I take the cast off and I look at both my arms, one will be thinner and atrophied and the other one will maintain its strength, right? It's exactly the same thing for a vagina. Any questions about that? Yeah. It's the muscle, it's the structure that atrophies, not just the tissue. So the tissues get thinner, but the vagina also shrinks a bit in size and can even change position. Like it really can change anatomically in a way. So again, not everybody experiences this, right? And then you have there are many problems, like you can have a prolapsed vagina too that falls out of you. I've seen that on quite a few women, and that makes sex, again, a whole other issue, But there are remedies for these things. You just have to talk about it. But people, because it's down their parts, it's like, ooh, I don't want to talk about down there. Even to their own doctors, they have a hard time talking about these things. So because of that, they suffer longer than they need to, Yeah. It stays, it doesn't, yes. It does, as long as the tissues stay moisturized. So like the more you have intercourse, like if you have regular intercourse, you produce more estrogen there. Like it has been shown to have more of that protective effect. It doesn't mean that you maintain it as you did at 20. You still have some atrophy, but it won't be painful, and you won't see those effects. Like, you won't feel the effects. You'd have to look at it under a microscope to actually see the difference between your pre-menopausal vagina and your postmenopausal vagina. But you won't necessarily feel. And there are intravaginal hormone creams now that you can use that are either estrogen-based or non-estrogen-based that go right into the vagina that not only lubricate but moisturize as well, so they help with that production and to keep it at that level that you need. So, which is important, and it's a simple thing, really, for women to do. You had a question? You got a way to go, yeah.
No, but I'm experiencing pain when I have intercourse. It's not as frequent as it was, and we use lubrication or lube, but it still hurts. Is there anything I can do?
Okay, so that, you see, when I hear that, I think, okay, evaluation required. Now I need to figure out what's going on. So first thing I look at is arousal. Is there sufficient arousal, sufficient lubrication? That's number one. Then I look for where's the pain coming from. Women who, is the pain deep inside or is the pain just as you go in? If the pain is just on entry, then I'm thinking of condition like vulvar vestibulitis or provoked vulvar vestibulitis, which should be checked, and then you have to kind of deal with pain control. It's more about managing that kind of pain. If it's deep pain with deep penetration, then I think about endometriosis. I'm thinking about, listen, I'm not a medical doctor by any means, but it's just from, having worked in the field for 30, 25 years. So I would look at some of those things. Sometimes if you have a cyst on an ovary, it could cause it. Sometimes if you have a retroverted uterus, it could cause the pain on deep penetration. Some positions may be more difficult than others. So that's when a sex therapist is helpful, and also physiotherapists. So there are physiotherapists that work with the pelvic floor, and that works great, by the way. So if you can contact like a pelvic floor physiotherapist, and I can give you some names, that would be helpful in terms of helping with that whole area and stretching it and all of that. You're welcome. I'll be around all weekend, by the way, so if you do have specific questions and you want to ask privately, I'm happy to answer them. So for men, so it takes longer for guys to get an erection, right? It takes longer to reach orgasm. That's just, and again, I see couples and women will say, is it me? Is he not attracted to me anymore? Again, why they need information? Because they take it personally. They think it's them. It has nothing to do with them. So yes, it takes longer. Yes, it takes more direct stimulation now. Whereas one time they could have a complete spontaneous erection just by thinking a sexy thought, now they actually need to be touched. And they need, to be touched and with a firm, grip, for example. The refractory period, the period between orgasms, gets longer and longer. So when you're young, when you're 18, 19 years old, you can have 10 ejaculations in a day. When you're 65, try having 2. So it changes. And it changes, is quite a drastic difference, right? But so what? It doesn't mean they can't get an erection. It doesn't mean they can't keep going. It just means they don't need to ejaculate. They're not producing as much sperm anyway. They don't need it. So also the intensity of ejaculation diminishes. So and the men in the room will remember this, when you're teenagers and you were masturbating, did you ever play the game with yourself? Let's see how high it will go. Let's see how far it will go. Let's see if I can hit the ceiling. Yeah? Okay. Well, guess what? All the time, yeah. Well, unfortunately, as you get older, what men notice is they're like, oh, it's just dribbling out now, It's a completely different situation. So don't even try to have that contest with yourself. You'll be very disappointed. But, it doesn't mean anything. It just means that you don't have the force, just like you can't run, 20 miles in whatever minutes. You can't, you just don't have that strength anymore. But it doesn't mean you don't enjoy it. And of course, the loss of erection after ejaculation, so detumescence, happens very rapidly. So trying to keep going is more difficult as you get older. Listen, I've seen this in guys who are 40 and guys who are 70. Like, it's so different for every man. It's just that you know, and when I see men with issues, I determine, is this psychological? Is this physical? Is this age related, or is it both? So that's my job, is to kind of figure out. But when I get if I get a 30-year-old guy with erectile dysfunction, it's not aging. There's something going on up here, for pretty darn sure, okay? But if I get a 45-year-old guy with erectile dysfunction, I'm not yet quite sure which is which, but all I know is I need to figure that out, because a man who experiences erectile dysfunction could be a sign of heart attack in 10 years from now. So you want to check that, and you want to make sure you stay on top of that, so that you check the cholesterol, heart, blood pressure, all of these things. So it's a precursor to. There is a study that was done that did in fact look at men with erectile dysfunction and saw that they were more likely to experience a heart attack 10 years down the road. So you always look for that. Sexual drive also diminishes for men. For some, not every man. It doesn't mean their interest diminishes. There's a bit, and we'll talk about that later, but it's not about interest rather than drive. Drive to me is the horny part. I'm horny versus, yeah, I like sex. Yeah, I can have sex. It's okay, I'll do it. It's fun, I like it. But it doesn't mean you're driven to do it in the same way. So obviously many things affect our ability to have sex and our drive and everything else. Your state of health. So in the book there are chapters on that. What happens if you're diabetic, cancer, arthritis, back issues, like all the age-related kind of conditions have an impact. And many medications have serious sexual side effects. But the top 200 medications that are prescribed in North America have a sexual side effect, and nobody tells you about it. I don't know how many people how many times you've been prescribed something and your doctor has said to you, by the way, this might affect your sex life. They don't tell you. And then, and it often happens, so that's one of the first things I evaluate. What medications are you on, right? And then it's like, sometimes it's so obvious. The connection is right there, and nobody told you, not even your pharmacist. It's like, So, again, lack of information on that. So, let's see. All right, can we talk about sexual desire for a minute? This is a biggie that I deal with in my practice, because I get couples who come in and one says, there's something wrong with my husband, or there's something wrong with my wife or my partner, because they never feel like having sex. I want it all the time, she never wants it. Or I want it all the time, he never wants it. So right now I'm going to be generalizing, all right? Because about 3/4 of women what I'm going to talk about now fits about 3/4 of women, 1/4 of men, and then the reverse. So it's not everybody, but it is I'm generalizing. So there's a few things before I get into that I want to think about. There's no normal. Like, people ask me all the time, right? Especially being out there, tell me, or I get accosted at parties, what's normal? What's the normal? How many times should I be doing it? And so I don't know, what does Cosmo say this month? That's my answer. It's like, because that's where we get it. It's like, well, I read a study in Cosmopolitan magazine that said I should be doing it 2.4 times a week. And then they think that's normal. Okay, maybe for Cosmo readers that's normal, but that's, and so just explaining the concept of what's normal is so difficult. I hate the word normal, but I always say, look, you create your own normal. As a couple, you decide what's normal for you. Who am I to judge what your couple feels is good for you? So if I enjoy sex only once a month with my partner, and my partner doesn't want it any more than I do, and both of us are satisfied and nobody is frustrated and everything else, our needs are being met in other areas, that's our normal. That works for us. Am I not normal if that's what I choose? Right? So somebody else says, well, we have sex every single day. That's our normal. Okay, well, that's good for you, because that works for both of you. So there's no one way. It's a question of, if you were to measure people's satisfaction, you'd get a truer picture than if you ask them what their number is. right? And then we all think, there was one study that was done that said we think, we feel worse because we think everybody else is doing it more than us. And that's what makes us feel bad about our number. Otherwise we wouldn't feel so bad, you know? So we all, and then if you really listen to people, you don't hear from people who aren't doing it. You hear from everybody who's doing it and doing it great. So you're thinking and you're listening and you're going, oh, gee, I'm not doing it so often. What's wrong with me? You know, but you're not saying it out loud. So the other person who's hearing it and not saying it out loud is also kind of thinking the same thing. And, you know, there you both are thinking you're not normal. Right? Doesn't that happen? Please correct me if you think I'm like off base on some of these issues, right? Okay. So we also have to accept the ebbs and flows, right? You know, does desire stay the same from 12 to 112? Of course not. Do we have periods when it's high, periods when it's lower? That's just life. That's just life. And you know how many times I'll get couples come in to see me, and this unfortunately is the male thing that I hear. It's like, I don't know, before we got married, we were having so much sex, and I really thought I found the one person that was going to be, that had the same sexual desire as me, and and now I think I've been fooled. She only did it because she wanted to get married, and I've been sold a bill of goods, and this is the reaction. No conception that there are ebbs and flows, just I always want it, therefore she has to always want it, and it should stay the same. Now, in long-term relationships, it doesn't stay the same. But I bet you if I put her with a new guy, she'd have lots of that desire come back. You know how often this happens, though, when I have to, it's like as I got older, and even as a therapist, I'm much more forward in what I say, and I say my mind more. So, and maybe some can hate me for it, but I really don't care. So I'm at the, you heard that expression, right? After 50, it's no longer a bucket list, it's a fuck it list. I'm like, fuck it. I'm going to say what I'm going to say. You don't want to come back, don't come back. So you can use that anytime. What was I'm thinking, what was I going to tell you? Oh yeah, the new partner, okay. So they'll come in and they'll say, oh, my partner doesn't want sex, and she's not interested. She's dead. She's not interested in sex. She hates sex. Da, 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 da. Okay. So I see her individually. Tell me what's going on. Tell me, do you ever think about sex? Oh yeah. Did you ever, did you read 50 Shades of Grey? Yeah. Did you get hot? Yeah. Did you masturbate? Yeah. Okay. So you're not dead, right? You're not dead. What's going on in your relationship? Then I find out all these things that are going on. Then I bring him back in the room. I say, okay, here's the deal. She likes sex. She is interested in sex. But she is not interested in sex with you. Now let's deal with the issue. Then we get to the real stuff. And they respect that, because then they listen, right? Okay, so the way that I was taught when I did all my training in sex therapy and whatever was the Masters and Johnson, Helen Singer Kaplan model, linear model, male model, I want to say, of sexual response. Starts with the desire, desire breeds arousal, arousal goes to orgasm. It's a very linear model. Guess what? That doesn't work for women. But there was a study that was done that said something like a huge number of women suffer from, I think it was like 70% of women suffer from some form of sexual desire problem or whatever. Like, it was a huge number. I said, okay, if that number's that big, isn't that the norm? Like, hello, somebody's not queuing. So if we change the definition, which was done, suddenly it became like 10%, 6%. Like, it went drastically down. Big difference in how we look at it. So we don't look at female desire in this way. We call this more of the male model. Again, I want to specify I'm generalizing. 3/4 of women don't fit this, but there is 1/4 of women that fit this model exactly. So And there's also men that 3/4 of men will fit this model, 1/4 of men do not, okay? So how do we see it for women? Now, you see how linear, it seems so simple, it's a mathematical equation, so simple. But here's why women just seem so damn complicated. Look at all these things we have to worry about. Okay, so what we see here is, it's another view of looking at it, all right? And this is how we understand desire, especially when it comes to women. It doesn't start with desire for women. And when I say desire, I'm talking about spontaneous desire. I'm talking about, gee, I'm horny, I really want to get it on now. Again, I want to back up. Long-term relationships we're talking about. Not talking about brand new relationships. I don't care how old you are. You can be 80 in a brand new relationship. You're as horny as you were when you were 15. Not the same. Long-term relationships. Let's keep this in mind. Now you're going to ask me, what's long-term? We could debate that after. There's studies that look at that as well. So desire is not, for women, desire is not spontaneous. It's reactive. They react. So here's the thing. Why do women have sex? Anyone want to? Why would a woman choose to have sex with her long-term partner? Yeah. Right? Her motivation is to connect with her partner, to bond with her partner. Anything else? Yeah. Healing. Okay. No, nobody said just because they're horny, right? Fun, yes, fun, right? Of course, so all those things are good reasons. Sometimes it's just well, you know, it's been a few weeks, I should do it. And it's not out of, necessarily out of duty. It's not a chore when she says that. It's, I know I'm gonna have fun. Like, I know it's good. I may not feel the strong urge to, but hey, you know, I know he probably wants to, and yeah, let's just do it. Let's just have fun. So it's just, whatever it is, right? The thing is that the key here is she's making a decision. It's a choice. It becomes a choice. Gee, I want to feel close to my partner. You know what? Tonight, let's have sex. It's not, oh, I'm feeling so horny right now. Let's go do it right now. She's thinking about it, okay? So she's saying, yes, let's do it. I know it's going to be great, but I'm not feeling it here yet. Okay, so when she starts to be stimulated, during that sexual stimulation is when the desire kicks in. That's where she becomes reactive. I'm looking at the women in the room. We can all be honest. Am I right or am I wrong? I'm right? Yes, there's still a person. Right. That's right. And for some reason, the women who end up being in the other 1/4, for some reason, always end up with the guys who aren't so into it, which is weird. In my practice, anyway, that's what I see. It's the opposite. Yeah. It's almost like, who played this dirty trick on us that we never match up? I don't get it. When she's angry at him? Ah. But he can't. Okay, so she's got the male brain for sex. Okay, so this is what we're talking about. There's still that, yeah. When you're horny and yes. Right, but it's going to be more often that. I would think, you know, if you were to track your horny levels, you might see a pattern in it. You know, like women will be more horny at ovulation time. There'll be certain times when they'll feel it and it'll be triggered more often. No, that's not what I'm saying. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Don't extrapolate. That's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm saying. Although, what's wrong with that? But okay, whatever, just saying. It's not a male, it's not, yes, it's the male thinking or the male pattern of human sexual response. I'm just talking about the one piece. I don't know you well enough to tell you have a male brain. Right, okay. Yeah, it's not. Well, it's how we view sexual response that's usually the male tendency. Yeah, it's tendency more than anything. Yeah, go ahead. Condition? Yes. So, okay, so we've got the sexual stimulation. And one of the things I think I want to, like, an example that I often use is, you know, for example, she walks out of the shower, she's naked. That is enough, that may be enough to trigger arousal in her partner. I want to know how many women, when their husbands or partners come out of the shower naked, they're throbbing clitorises. How often? Okay, good. But you're 22. You don't count. You're not on this planet long enough. So you know where I'm getting at, right? Okay. Oh yeah, there. Exactly. That's it. Exactly. Give me that 22-year-old. Maybe that'll happen, right? Okay. Don't tell my husband I said that. Okay. So part of this process is that, right? So she makes the decision, she knows it's going to be great, right? She makes a decision, and the stimulation begins, usually 2 minutes or so of direct clitoral stimulation. She wants to keep going. Yeah, keep going, keep touching, keep going. Let's go, let's go, let's go. And so that desire is completely, kicked in there. At the end of it, she says, that was amazing, great. She evaluates it, great, great, great. She says, oh, we should do this more often. And then the cycle begins again. Of course we should do this more often, but the cycle begins again. And the thing is that women need conditions. That's the difference also between men and women. There's an old saying that a man can, and again, I'm being very gender, whatever. But a man can have sex in a pigsty, but if there's a sock on the floor, God damn it, it's so distracting for her, she can't do it. So really what that says is there's a lot more detail in her brain that interfere with her ability to let it all go and enjoy her body at the moment, right? There's dishes in the sink, lunches have to be made, there's a load of laundry that has to change, she's doing her grocery list, oh my God, tomorrow I have a presentation, what am I gonna do, and it just goes on, right? She can't cut that off. She has difficulty shutting that out. Are we in, yeah? What do you do about that? I started yoga. Like that has taught me how to empty that brain of mine. Just saying, yes. But it's true. This is where it's so important to take hold, figure out what's going on and what's interfering with the enjoyment of your sexuality because you own it, because you're doing it for you. You're not, many women will say, I have to give him sex. What are you talking about, give him? You're taking. Stop giving and start taking. This is your sexuality too. This is not a chore. This is not something you do for him. This is something you do for you. And start taking charge of your own sexuality, all right? And asking for what you need, saying what you need, etc. So what... Okay, well that's what I say, right? She wants sex, maybe just not with you. Boy, that's a shocker. She looks at me like, did she just say that? Oh my God, that's what I was thinking. It's very funny. It's one of my favorite books, Porn for Women. Each page has a guy doing some chore. One guy's in the toilet, one guy's changing a diaper, okay? Why do you think this book has been successful? Why? What does it say about women and their sexuality? What does it say? What do they want? God, no. No, yes. Bingo, they feel overwhelmed, exactly. So when they see their partner, doing something, what do they feel in their heart? Yeah. Yes, right. So you know what they feel in their heart? They feel warmth. They're like, oh, that's so nice. I didn't even have to ask him. You made the bed? That's so nice. I mean, it sounds stupid, okay? It really, when you really pick it apart, it sounds ridiculous, and this book is ridiculous, but it makes a point. And that's the point is that she requires warmth in her heart in order to want and in order to make that decision to have the sex, all right? So you talked about your friend, right? If she's angry or they have a fight, she's still able to? Okay, but most women, if they're angry at their partners, if they had a fight that morning and he comes to her at night and says, honey, want to have sex? She's like, you know what? I'm getting out of here. Don't ask me. Don't bug me. Okay, but let's reverse it. Again, we're generalizing, but let's reverse it. You had a fight in the morning and you go to him and you say, come on, hon, let me give you a blowjob. Come on, Is he going to say, no, you're not. Don't touch me. I'm not happy with you. Don't touch me. How often is that going to happen? Okay, right. You got it. And that's why. You get the point, right? So it's about that feeling, that warmth, that connection. We talked about why do women have sex? Because they're seeking something much more than the orgasm, especially in long-term relationships. They want and need the connection, the value of them, not just their sexual person, right? So those are the things that turn them on. So just to wrap up, a couple of things, things that I talk to my clients about is if you want to get healthier, you've got to make pleasure a priority. You've got to make pleasure a priority. A lot of people don't. And they just go on with life and get so busy, and they don't have date nights. And people balk when I say, okay, you're going to put it in your agenda. Saturday night, that's a good night. That's when you're going to have sex. I want to see it put in your agenda right now. And they look and they say, oh, that's not good sex. We can't plan it. Like, that's not, spontaneous. It's not spontaneous. Well, if you're waiting for spontaneous, it's not going to happen. Sorry. So plan it. And for women, that works best because it's just like planning to go on a trip. If she plans to go on a trip, she's not just taking her bags and leaving. She's thinking, what am I going to wear? What am I going to bring? Which lingerie am I going to put in there? The kid's taken care of. Everything's done. Okay. Great. I can relax now. So that's what happens. When she knows it's happening, she is going to relax. She is going to prepare herself to enjoy it. So, not at 11 o'clock at night when she's crawling into bed after a long day and done everything she's had to do, and you turn over and say, you want to have sex? That's not the time. So planning it, sometimes it'll work, but, if you really want something right, you have to prioritize it, right? She needs intimacy on different levels too. We have to develop intimacy on different levels. Resentment. Killer of all sex is resentment. If I resent my partner, I am not going to want to have sex with that partner. And that's the hardest work I have to do as a therapist is identifying all those levels of resentment. And sometimes it's an accumulation of years of it. And it's tough. So you got to let it go. And shame. People still have shame about their sexuality. They can barely say the words. Never mind, so there's still a lot of shame tied into sex. And then they have to take a good look at what's going on rather than ignore, right? So some of the things I talk about is, talk about how it was in the beginning for you. You have that discussion. Be more romantic, non-sexual touching, be receptive, ask for what you want, do it even if you're not so into it, give it a chance, and take charge of your sexuality. That's the most important thing, is take charge. For the age-related stuff, discuss with your doctor. Practice Kegel exercise. Everybody knows what Kegel exercise is, I'm assuming. Use Benoit balls, whatever you need, but you need to maintain that muscle tone. It's also really great for ejaculatory control for men. So Kegel exercises are always important. Body image issues also for a lot of people, men and women deal with this, and the adaptation to changes as well. patience. You need patience. You want to talk about hormones. We talked about that earlier. And deal with the issues that are interfering. Like, start to actually ask yourself, what could it be? What is changing here? What's going on? Is it my relationship? Is it my age? Is it my stress level? Is it depression? Is it anxiety? Like, what is going on? So, and then, of course, we talk a lot about expanding your repertoire, which is also really important, but you can't do that if you don't have open discussions about sex. You can't just say, let's do that. Hey, let's go to a fetish club tonight, and you've never, ever even discussed it. Just like you shouldn't really just tell your partner about a fantasy. Right? You can't just dump it on them without checking first, is it okay, like, can we share fantasies? Yeah, because you never know. I've seen one guy's fantasies destroy a marriage. So you have to be careful about that. Putting aside your expectations, really listening, and my time is pretty much up. So yeah, okay, good. So I'll leave some time for questions. But this is something that, another quote that I love. We've got to learn that sexy is not a look or a youth-only age-specific condition. Sexy is all of us at any age. Vitality, sensuality, and the urge to love and be loved are timeless and ageless in the human spirit. And you could be any age and be madly in love, any age and feel great sex. So that's the important thing. So in summary, love changes. You can't be in lust forever. Another pet peeve, I love you, but I'm not in love with you. What the fuck does that mean? You know? It means I'm not really in lust with you, but you're not gonna be, okay, after 20, 30 years together. So shut up. Sexuality is an integral part of a relationship. Sex has no expiration date, okay? And relationships take work. The work isn't the word, it's effort. It takes effort. If you want to plant a garden, if you don't take care of your garden, it will wither, all right? So you've got to take care of it. That's the main thing. So I always just tell them, just do it and see what happens, you know? Any questions? Anything you want to add? We're good? Covered all the bases? Sure. Go for it. Thank you for your attention. I look forward to spending more time with you guys.